let's go ahead and get started this evening. Mayor's Night Out, first one of the year, 2nd District. I want to say thank you to Irving School for hosting this event. In particular, I want to thank Ms. Johnson and Ms. Gomez. Let's give Irving and the principals a big round of applause. Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump right in. Leanne Munoz, this is a special events coordinator for the City of Hammond. This is her first Mayor's Night, so have mercy on her. Leanne, we'll go ahead and start. We'll have the department heads introduce themselves.
Good evening, Chris Sackler, Hammond Legal Aid.
Ed Cruza, Hammond Water.
Donna Muta, Hammond Parks.
Sharon Daniels, Personnel.
Phil Talon, Planning and Development.
Gabby Gallegos, College Bound.
Ron Novak, Environmental. Stan Destany, City Engineer.
John Dodingham, Police Department.
Jackie Lackey, 2nd District Councilman.
Mark McLaughlin, Chief of Staff.
I'm not holding this for everybody.
Heather Gray, City Controller.
Come on, Mayor. Milo Krasinski, Port Authority.
Jack Smith, Hammond Sewer Department.
Kurt Cook, Building.
Dennis Radowski, United Neighborhoods, Inc.
Chris Cantor, Legal Department.
Marty Williams, Hammond Sanitary District.
Steve Fowler, Public Works.
Kelly Crane, Code Enforcement. Chris Campbell, Information Technology.
Jim Callahan, Inspections Department.
Gloria Mabry, Planning and Development. Africa Tar Economic Development. Carmen Paniagua, Housing Authority.
Kevin Margraf, Hammond Fire Department.
Leanne Munoz, Parks Department.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Again, thanks. Great crowd tonight. Mayor's Night Out, I want to remind you how we do this. We've been doing this for 12 years, so this is no secret, but it's all driven by your written questions, okay? So I got Eva over here, Eva and Jill. Right in front of them are written questions. If you have a question about something going on, please fill out the question with them. We will start it as a topic. So let's say your question is about lighting on Gosselin. We'll talk about maybe lighting issues. If somebody has a question about lighting, you could raise your hand. We'll come up to you. And we'll talk about that issue. And then we'll go on to the next question. I want to remind you, this is all being taped on Go Hammond TV. Jake back there. Is it live tonight? It is live right now. So it's also archived. So if you want to watch it, you can just go to Go Hammond TV and click on tonight's link. So I want to thank the public officials in attendance as well. First, our city clerk, Robert Golick. Thank you very much. Councilwoman at Large, Janet Vanez. Hammond's 4th District Councilman, Bill Emerson. Okay. And of course, your 2nd District Councilman, Jackie Lackey.
Well, welcome Mayor Tom McDermott, the department heads, and the residents of 2nd District. Our guests, to the mayor's first night out of 2015. Thank you for all attending our rather cold evening. With all these distinguished guests and our panel, tonight now is your time to express your concerns and ask questions. Without any further delay, please give a warm hand welcome to our Mayor, Thomas McDermott.
Okay, so tonight's forum is it's all about written questions. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Leanne? Like I said, this is Leanne's first Mayor's Night, but
Bear with me, please.
she's going to do great. So.
Okay, the first question is, someone would like to know why the house on Elm was taken off the demo list
What's this now?
for Board of Public Works.
Could you repeat the question?
Someone would like to know why the house on Elm was taken off the demo list.
All right, that's... Yeah, if we can have a particular address.
Yes, 4304.
How about we do this? Chris Cantor is corporate counsel for the City of Hammond. Chris, why don't you just talk about how a house ends up on a demo list and how houses come off of the demo list in general. We don't have to talk about this particular property.
I don't have a 4304, I have a 4306.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Let's see, findings in order were recorded on, my visions are used to be, the findings order recorded on March 25th, 2014. What makes you think it's off the demolition list?
It was not in the newspaper anymore. see, what day was it bid? It was bid for demolition. Let's see, data mailing. Because just because it hasn't come down, it's not in the paper anymore. Let's see who owned it. Dennis Hatters, that guy owns it. It was open, the bid opening, the public bid opening was on, let's see, what day was it on? The date of the mailing for the bid, bid opening was May 8th, 2014. So it just might be waiting for permits to issue too. I'll have to double check because I don't see it.
So it doesn't sound like it came off the list? Is that
Well, what I don't see is I have a file for each one of the properties, and I don't see a rehab agreement. The only way it would come off is if there was a rehabilitation agreement.
Anybody, code inspections, anybody?
But it's already been bid and awarded, and the order's recorded on the property. The only thing that would stop it from coming down now is a rehab agreement with an owner. Kurt, do you remember anything on that one? Did you inspect that one?
Was that the one that had the fire in it? No. Okay, then that one I don't remember. And as Chris said, the only way that they would come off the list is if they enter into a rehabilitation agreement with the city and post a bond. But sometimes between the time that it's actually awarded and the time it's torn down, it can be months, if not longer. There can be a change of ownership. But the nearest, the best of my knowledge, that it's still active and is still ready to come down.
And as to the second question about how properties get on the demolition list, it's usually from complaints, police calls, fire calls. If we have a fire, there's a lot of properties that end up on the demolition list after they have a fire. And then there's a legal process that has to be followed to get to the point where we issue a demolition order. But 4306 Elm has already been ordered demolished. It's already had its hearing. It's already had its open bid. We might just be waiting for the weather to break for the actual demolition to take place.
Chris, we're in the process of drafting the state of the city, and we're going through different drafts, but I know part of it talks about demolition. Do you remember what the number of demolitions we've done since I've been mayor?
Well, when we did Florence, that was the 400th. So I know.
Kurt gave me the email on this. You remember that number, Kurt?
We're on the other side of 400 now.
I think we're actually closer to 500 now, right?
Yeah, we did 400 last May. We've issued 92 demolition permits since then, and we probably have 15 or 20 more that are ready to go, like the one they were just talking about on Elm. So yeah, we're very, very close to actually doing our 500th now.
It's a big part of this administration always has been putting money off to the side so that we could rid ourselves of these problems before they become a problem like we experienced with our neighbor to the east, where it becomes a dumping ground and a haven for crime. So we've been ahead of this issue, and it's something we intend to keep on following with. So did we answer your question, ma'am? Good. Any other follow-ups on demolitions in general? Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Okay, the next question is for the street department. Is there any snow removal program currently?
Yes. First off, it's the Department of Public Works. We merged street, recycling, and sanitation at the time into one department, and parks, into one department called the Department of Public Works. Divided that department into 6 zones. So we have a zone captain a zone supervisor. Second district in this case is Steve Fowler, which is why he's here. But Steve also works for Gary Gleason, who is over the top of all of those departments, Gary. And Johnny Perez, is Johnny here also? No, Johnny's not here also. So what we did was we streamlined management, and we gave a lot of responsibility to the district captain, in this case your district captain, and the second is Steve. But Gary's been working, he was my street commissioner before he became in charge of the Department of Public Works. Do you mind running the microphone to Gary so he could sort of generally answer this question about, it's not just really a second district question, it's about a bigger picture. What is your strategy?
Actually, we're really good about watching the weather. Like, we look like we have 3 to
I always make fun of you about that. Gary always knows the weather.
Oh.
I'm coaching the baseball team in the middle of summer. I call Gary up, hey, we getting rained out? No, you'll be fine, Mayor. Go.
So, play ball. But yeah, we're always way ahead of it. We've got plenty of salt. Our salt is ordered during the summer. There's numerous times in the last few years other towns and cities around us ran out. Hammond has never run out of salt. We have over 70 pieces of equipment that we split up through the city, from front end loaders to small tractors, the large trucks, small trucks. And we also get help from water, sanitary, all the other departments always call and say, if you need a problem or you have a problem, get hold of us and we'll send our equipment over. Do we have a program? Yes. Everybody has their own trucks, their own men, their own district. So that way they know all the little dead ends and stuff like that that they do. So we kind of watch the weather. That's kind of our bread and butter is the snow. Everything else after that's kind of secondary.
Steve, you want to add to that?
Just following up what Gary had said, we have 5 different segments in the 2nd district where I have 5 main drivers that plow everything, and then we also have 2 backup trucks which will assist them, or if one breaks down, we have them to kind of slide in too. So, and I'm out there too, plugging around somewhere. So we've been really good. Last winter was horrible. I mean, we were all dead tired and it was tough. But so far, knock on wood, this year's been very good. We've only had a couple of call-outs outside of regular hours this year.
Yeah.
It's been nice, or at least a couple of full call-outs.
It's funny, I heard a mayor one time that once the mayor retired from office, they said, what are you going to enjoy most when you're not the mayor anymore? And I said, I'm going to enjoy a good snowfall and not worry about anything about it. And I totally know what that person's talking about. I mean, I get PTSD when a heavy snowfall comes, so I want you to know that I am in communication constantly with Gary Gleason, and he's constantly updating me on what's going on. And I always know the workers are out there working real hard, but the thing is, we get compared a lot in Hammond to, oh, look at Whiting Street, they're beautiful, and Hammond Street, you guys look horrible. And I like to point out to people that Whiting is like a small neighborhood in our city. Hammond is a big city. Robertsdale is huge compared to Whiting. So it's hard to compare us to Whiting when we got, how many miles of streets do we have? But how many, in those 25 square miles, how many hundreds of miles of streets do you maintain? I mean, what, 300-400 miles to the end, you know?
There's about 269 miles of streets in the city.
That's what I'm talking about with Stan, by the way, right? Right? This guy can never retire. It's like about 269, so. About, right around 269 miles, but that was good. So anyway, we work our best. Why don't we ask particular questions? If you have particular recommendations, maybe we're missing an area. I get certain questions a lot. The one I get a lot is, those guys are intentionally throwing snow into my driveway. Or they are constantly, Steve Fowler doesn't like me, and he intentionally pushes all the snow into my driveway. I hear that one all the time, not about Steve Fowler. I never hear that about Steve. But I just hear it in general. And I can tell you, if our guys had that much time to actually be that strategic about where they're throwing their snow, they're not very good employees. It's just, Gary, I'm sure you hear that, right, Gary? I mean, you used to plow snow.
I still do.
Yeah? I mean, do you ever throw snow in people's driveway? Push it to the right, I got you. Not intentionally, though.
After being out all night or a day or two, you go home and I've got the same thing. You're gone by my house.
But you feel the same pressure when it's snowing to clear as much street as quickly as possible, right? Right.
There's something on this side, railroad, cemetery, something like that, then we can do that side. We try not to, but there, let's call it, let's call it.
No good. Well, we're doing a great job keeping the streets clear so far this year. Of course, it's only snowed one time, basically. So, anyway, hey, Councilman at Large, Robert Markovich, welcome, Councilman. All right, let's step into the next question.
Okay, I believe this is also for Public Works. Light is burned out on a city pole on the 1900 block of Superior.
All right. Oh, I should do this live. This is my opportunity to brag about Hammond 311, okay? This is my new mission in life, is everywhere I go and I see a situation, a question like this come up, how many people, by a show of hands, have a smartphone in here? Awesome. I was scared when I asked that, okay? Now, everybody that just raised their hand, there's an app on your phone called Hammond 311. It's free to download through the App Store on an Android or your iPhone. You download this app, you can put that complaint right into this, and it'll take you seconds. I did one the other day in a council meeting, it took me like a minute. And I did it in front of the whole council. I was in a real hurry, because I wanted to prove a point. So this question that was just asked, we could literally put it in there, and you'd say street light out. It would ask you the location, you'd pinpoint the location on the graph, you'd put street light out, it would say, do you want to put this in under your own name or anonymously? Because some people don't want to do stuff in their own name, I get it. So you put it in your own name or you put it in anonymously. I've done it both ways, because they always get it done when you put it in under the mayor. But if I do it anonymously, I'm testing the system to see if it's getting done. The long and the short of it is, this complaint of yours will go directly to the lighting department. They'll get the emails directly in the lighting department, the person that handles that. And then they are forced to respond to you in a fairly timely manner. Chris, am I butchering this? This is Hammond's IT director, Chris Campbell. He's one of those normal computer guys. He actually talks English when he talks to you. So how long, do you sort of monitor when the complaints come in? This is the guy that's in charge of the computer system for our city, by the way. So.
It's not IT certified.
Hey, could you sort of describe the process? So let's say I put in a complaint about graffiti on the street sign, which is what I did most recently. How does that process work?
As soon as you hit submit, it creates an email and it's sent to the graffiti removal program.
What happens if they don't check their email for a week? Do you call them up and say, hey, you got a complaint in here?
Typically, yeah. I keep an eye on it. I don't like things to sit there and do nothing.
So you're monitoring like the whole system, basically, all the complaints coming in and out?
Every ticket that's issued, an email is sent to me as well.
Good. And then what happens is, so you send it to graffiti removal or street lighting, you'll get an email back that says, we got your complaint. We're acting on your complaint, right?
That's correct. Every time somebody makes a comment or it's been assigned to someone or it's been closed, an email is sent to the person that generated the issue.
Cool. Kelly, could you grab a microphone real quick? Kelly is in charge of Hammond Code Enforcement. One of his departments, a lot of C-click fixes coming into your department. A lot. You monitor it yourself?
Mostly, there's so many that actually the inspectors had to start taking them over.
So you divided it into 6 districts?
Yes, exactly.
Really?
Yeah, I just couldn't.
Do you monitor all of them that come in? I mean, when you say, are there dozens or are there hundreds?
I'd say hundreds. I've asked Chris that if anything that is stuck open that hasn't been taken care of, to direct it to me so I can find out exactly what's going on. Many times when we get a citation out, it takes us about a month to get in front of the judge in court. So sometimes it's just a matter, it's not that we're not doing anything, docket's full, we got to get in front of the judge. So that takes some time. I don't know of any problems. I haven't got any recently. Chris has had some in the past that we've been able to answer to and explain what the situation was.
Right. Okay, thanks for both of you. I know that, and we'll get to your second, and I know that usually when the employees are nervous about a system or they're sort of like, hey, you know, we get a lot of complaints with the system, Mayor, that's a good thing. You know, it's a direct way for you to communicate right with the department that's affected. A lot of times you don't know what the phone number is to lighting department in the city of Hammond. This gets you right to us. It's a great tool. All we're trying to do is get more people to download it. In fact, what we're talking about doing is hitting the road, handing you a packet of information about this and a number of other things, and we're going to start that very soon. So I think it's a great tool. A lot of you that are here right now are very civic-minded people. Obviously, you're at a community meeting. This is a great way for you to communicate with us. So, Hammond 311, I have a question? Yeah. Thank you, I appreciate it. It's amazing, right? It is. I do it as the mayor. I get very good response, okay? I do it anonymously because I want to test the system. It works both ways. So if you do it anonymously, they don't know. It could be me doing it anonymously, and they're going to do it, and I know they do, okay?
Mayor, I wanted to tell you something that fell under what you just said. We also watch the 311 app, so it might not be directed to us, but if it goes to code and says they got a lot of debris out, we also give it to our foreman. It might not affect them. Why I'm saying that is the sign that went on there that said there was graffiti. We also are the sign department, so we sent the sign driver over. It was too graffitied. It couldn't be repaired, so we changed the stop sign, and at that time they also did the one-way right under it. So we were able to change it even though it wasn't directed to us.
And that was done at like 7:30 the next morning, right?
Yeah, or sooner, yeah. They start at 6, we handed it to them, and then when
it was closed out on the computer. And this is the point I was trying to make. I was in a council meeting, and a council person does it the old-fashioned way, and we're trying to change even the councilmen, and none of them are here, so I feel comfortable saying this, but he waited literally 5 days to get to a council meeting, to read off a letter, says send a letter to Mayor McDermott about a stop sign that has graffiti on it. And while I got that complaint, I bust out my phone real quick, and I got the exact location, I put exactly what we needed to in that computer program, and I stood up, literally. Councilwoman Vanez was speaking after this gentleman, and I came up right after, and I said, in that period of time that Councilwoman Vanez was speaking, I took that complaint, put it into Hammond 311, and it was done the next morning at 7:30. It's like, we don't need to wait 2 and 3 weeks anymore to get it. We don't need to do it the old-fashioned way of you calling up your council person and doing this. No offense, you could do that, and I know the council people are helping us put these complaints in, but this gives you a direct voice right to the department, and it works. So we're trying to get more people to use it, and that's the long and short of it. So any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the garbage department. I never realized how difficult it is to move those containers in the snow. So I keep my snow, I keep it clear now.
Thank you.
Well, now, the other thing I've got is a problem with the railroads. I've been calling for about 3 months to engineering, and the railroad tracks at the IHB by Silgan, the old can company, and the one there by Hammond Lead, the spikes are actually coming up and ruin people's tires, and nobody's responded on that one.
Okay. Chris, did you get that? Or somebody, maybe could, Steve?
It's between Summer and the Boulevard.
Okay.
The other thing is, I'm tired of this litter, these Hoya newspapers in plastic bags being thrown on the lawn.
Yes, sir.
Well, I called the Tribune company, and they said they would delete it. It hasn't happened.
Yeah, that we've had that complaint a lot, because a lot of these newspapers, and I know Jake Jacobs is the editor of a publisher of a community newspaper, and he doesn't have this practice, but there's some newspapers in the city with the practice of just going down the street and throwing the paper and getting it on your front lawn, maybe getting it, but it could be viewed as littering, for sure. And then you talk to smart lawyers like Attorney Kantar. No.
Is this the OI magazine, H-O-I?
Yes,
Is this OI?
yes, it is, Chris.
Okay. I've just issued a citation to them because they were throwing papers into they're not supposed to throw papers into the city property, the parkway. They're supposed to, if you want to put something on somebody's door, you want to put something on somebody's porch, it's, that's their business. But the 1800 block of Roberts, they were just throwing them there, and they were they clog up the gutter. They fall into the storm sewer. So I just issued them a citation. So if there's any more locations, please let me know. You can either do it through 311 or you can call the law department, because I can always issue another citation. But I need a location where it happened, so that I'm just not pulling things out of the air. I need an actual location.
When you try to regulate things like this, do you run into First Amendment issues, Chris?
Well, you do have a First Amendment right to pass out things, but nobody has a First Amendment right to litter.
Right. But if they could say legitimately, hey, you're trying to stifle my free speech, right, that's where we start running into it. We can't come out and say, you cannot have newspapers like boy being thrown about our city.
But we can say you can't throw them in the city streets because it clogs up the storm sewers.
But I agree.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
They drive by in cars and throw them out the car window. That is littering. I don't care if it landed in my yard. I had asked them, written to them, and given my address last year and said, don't throw them in my yard. I'm still getting it in my yard, so I complained to Chris. I mean, in 30 minutes, I had a bag overflowing with them that I gave to Chris. But that's littering. Throw them out the car window. I don't care if it does land in your yard. They cannot throw. I mean, can I drive around the city streets and throw things out my car window? Wouldn't I be littering? Would I be cited for that? How can they throw them out their car window?
I agree, but I mean that's a fine line though, because if we have an ordinance that tries to deal with this, we could find ourselves getting sued from organizations like that that say, hey, because we're government and we can't stifle free speech, which is, I imagine the editors and the publisher of OI would say this is our free speech, and you're not giving me an ability to express my free speech. No, yeah, but I think if they get it on your front lawn, I don't think that's considered littering. Do you know, Chris? Even if you don't want it, it's like, hey,
No, we told them that if they're going to do it, they need to place it on private property, and they can't put it in the city.
But Bonnie doesn't want it.
Right. Well, she has to keep calling them. I mean, I guess she could always bring an action against them, but we can only enforce what's going on in city property. I can't enforce what's going on her property.
Okay.
But just keep calling and writing them.
Great conversation. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump into the next question?
Okay, this question is for sanitation. I would like to know what is going on with the old Irving Little League field. It looks like there could be some hazardous material that is flammable. What would happen if there's a fire and the smoke goes towards Columbia or Irving schools?
Irving Little League Field is the sanitary sewer, the storm basin.
It says Irving Little League
It's
Field.
a big, yeah. So Irving Little League, we, for years, going back into the 70s and 80s, the city of Hammond always knew that eventually where Irving Little League was, even when my dad was mayor, they knew eventually Irving Little League was going to be relocated because eventually they were going to have to build the sanitary stormwater sewer, well, the CSO basin.
Yes, exactly.
Right? They knew eventually it was going to happen. Through the 80s, through the 90s, when I took over, I was briefed. This is eventually going to go away. We kept that Little League open for the first 8 years of my mayor.
That's correct.
And then eventually we had to do what the sanitary, what the Environmental Protection Agency was ordering us to do. Marty, you want to talk about that?
Well, we were forced, obligated actually by the federal government and the Department of Justice to build that basin so that we further eliminate the times that we actually dump into the Grand Calumet River. We went from 27 times a year to maybe 4 times a year, which is a dramatic improvement. That basin holds 34 million gallons of both combined stormwater and raw sewage.
27 to 4. And you know what the EPA would say about 4 CSO events?
They don't like it. They want
4 too many. They want 0.
That's
And you have to understand, in the old days, in Hammond, that's what our sanitary plant was built for. I mean, it would overflow and it was no big deal. It was like that everywhere. And lately, we've had these, clean water regulations where 27 events is way too many. So they forced us, in this case, to float $55 million worth of bonds to build how many gallon basin?
34 million.
34 million.
gallons.
And since we've had that, how many overflow events have you had?
None.
0. I mean, so when you see that filled with water, that's water that used to either spill into the Grand Calumet River, ultimately ended up in Lake Michigan, or, worst case, spill into our basements. We have a place to put the water now. But you have to understand something that's going on. That's a big issue that's facing our city right now is the EPA is working with the Hammond Sanitary District on a final solution so that we have 0 overflow events every year. Marty, what's the price tag the EPA is estimating?
$250 million they're expecting the sanitary district to spend in the next 15 years.
This is no joke. This is the EPA. They're not asking, they're telling, which would make your sanitary district, if your water bill go up dramatically. So we're in the position of either saying, yes, that's a great deal, EPA, but where do I sign up, which we haven't done, or getting sued by the EPA, going to court and having a judge figure out what that final amount's going to be. And quite frankly, a lot of people think it's in our best interest to get sued and to go to court and to give it to a judge and have the judge determine. They say, Mayor, if they're asking for $250 million, the judge isn't going to come back and say $260 million. What if the judge comes back and says, listen, as a compromise, I'm going to have Hammond do $180 million worth of work. We saved $70 million by going to court. It's a lot of money. And that's a big savings, and theoretically, so I'm not asking to get sued, but you have to understand, in this case, this is a big time number they're asking for. It would change our bills forever in City Hammond, and we would have 0 overflows every year. But we'd have to pay for it. We would have to pay for it. So, this goes back to, you've invested in me for the last 11 years as your mayor, and I hope right now I can pay off some big dividends for our city, because we're talking about big numbers, and it's going to change our city. So,
and it's a real, I can't stress it enough, it's a real major issue. I'm down in Chicago 2 times a month down at the federal building, meeting with the Department of Justice and the US EPA. This isn't just Hammond. This is sanitary districts across the country. And Mayor, you can maybe highlight the Evansville case, which is a good case that was agreed to and then denied by the EPA.
I was just at the U.S. Conference of Mayors last week, Washington, D.C. I was at a water conference because I feel water being our future, I should be part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors water panel. In this conference, the mayor gets up. He's been a mayor like 28 years. I think he was a mayor of either Tulsa or Topeka, Kansas, one of those two, but he was a gentleman. I don't know if he was Democrat or Republican. This guy reminded me of Mayor Patrick. He was very smooth, but he was super, super sharp. And he got up and he spoke to the conference. He's been mayor for 28 years, so all the mayors knew him. I didn't, but I acted like I did, like everybody else. This mayor gets up and says, I want to tell you a story. We signed a consent decree with the EPA And you know what? That consent decree was the worst thing we ever did because it was a blank check. They would always tell us millions and millions of dollars worth of additional investment we had to make. He was the worst thing I ever did was cooperate with the EPA. I'm telling all you mayors, if you're ever in a position like this, the best option you have is to fight these people. And he was fired up. And it was speaking right to me. We're going through this as we speak. Do we want to settle with the EPA for the huge number they're talking about, or do we want to take our chance? You know, and nobody wants to see that headline, you know, EPA sues City of Hammond. So I need to communicate clearly with the residents, like, why it's good to get sued in this case. Because they're asking for huge money, and even if we could reduce it by $50 million. And, you know, so, did I miss anything on that, Marty?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Mayor.
And it's over, what, a 20-year period? Is that the payback on that?
Yes.
Which is a big number.
And the thing is, if you go down Columbia Avenue with all the improvements that are made, it's absolutely beautiful. I can't remember a time that Columbia Avenue looked as nice with the lighting and the streeting and the sidewalks. You get down to the riverside, and if you look towards the east, you'll see more abundance of wildlife in the river, along the riverbanks, than you'd ever seen before. So I encourage you, if you're down in our area there, which is not far from here, take a look at the Grand Calumet to see the improvements that we've already made, that it's already brought the wildlife back to the river.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So anyway, let's step in. Yes, sir.
Is there a chance it'll cost more if we go to court?
I guess there's always the chance, but, you know, from the mayors I talked to, and I talked to really smart attorneys that deal with, the thing about lawyers that we're dealing with, Faegre, Baker, and Daniels in this case, which is a worldwide law firm. It's a great law firm out of India in this case. These people deal with multiple governments. This is not only dealing with the EPA, but for them, they deal with, it's like a game for them. They defend cities against the EPA. This is what they do. And I have very smart lawyers telling us, Mayor, you're absolutely crazy if you settle with them. And then you're skeptical because you're like, okay, you're a lawyer, and this is not going to be a small case, right? So is he giving me bad advice so he can get the legal fees? We're very good clients of this firm. I don't see that. I think they honestly believe if we fight, and by the way, this litigation could stretch for 10 years easily. And over that 10-year period, we would pay zero. And eventually we would have to settle with them, and they're like, man, there's no judge that's going to come back and say, you know what? They're only asking for $250 million in the EPA. I'm going to make you do $275. It just doesn't work that way, generally. I guess there's always that risk.
If it gets to be 10 years, the cost of doing it, turning black water and white water and gray water into EPA acceptable water, is definitely going to be more expensive than it is now.
Or you could have somebody like Jeb Bush in office that looks at EPA a lot differently than Barack Obama does, you know? Yes. A lot of things could happen, you know? I appreciate I mean, believe me, this is a big time issue that we have facing us right now, and I appreciate all the feedback I can get. I'm not trying to poo-poo what you're saying. I'm just telling you what my lawyers are telling me, and these guys have done good work for us in other issues. Like the water issue, these are the same lawyers that worked with us on that issue, and that worked out great for us. I don't think they're going to burn a bridge over legal fees, you know?
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions on this? This is a great topic. It's sort of wonky. A lot of people really don't want to talk about wastewater, but when you think about it, when you flush the toilet, it goes somewhere. We got to get rid of it. So that's what we do. We get rid of poop. So, yes, sir.
Wastewater. Question. Talking about pollution going back into the river.
Right.
How about the water coming up through your sewer into your basement?
Yeah.
That's what affects us most.
Right. I actually think the TSO overflow basin that we built is going to help tremendously in that regard, because usually we're drowning in water when these overflow events happen into your basement.
You know, what I don't understand really is I've lived here my whole life, for many, many years. I've lived in the house I'm at 40 years. Never had a backup in my sewer in the basement.
Okay.
Well, then all of a sudden it starts coming up through the basement, through the pipes in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Floods everything in the basement. So you clean the mess up. Next big storm, it's coming up through the basement. So something had to change, or something was done to cause that water that never came up for 40 years to come up into these basements.
Okay, yeah, obviously that's something that I would have to have my city engineer and our sanitary district look at. But I want to tell you that we track flooding events and we have since my dad was mayor. And if you ask my Dad, what was the worst part when you were Mayor of Hammond? I know what he'd tell me. He would say I was scared to death every time it rained, because when it would rain back in the 80s, everybody would flood. And the mayor gets all those phone calls. Well, I'm just telling you what my dad would say. And I know that because I've heard it from him before. Stan, I mean, we've done hundreds of millions of dollars worth of work on Hammond's infrastructure since Mayor DeLo and Mayor McDermott have been mayor. Fact. A lot of times when we're doing our infrastructure work, it's separated our storm sewers from our sanitary sewers, which is going to help in that problem. Has the number of flooding events gone down since you've been engineer?
Basement backups are way down from what they were 15 and 20 years ago.
Why do you think that's the case?
Expanded the system. Well, because of all the improvements that have been done. We've added storm sewers, we've upsized sewer systems. There's another issue going on because you're getting more tropical type rain events that the system was never designed for. Typically our system can handle a 2.5, 3-inch rain, but we've been getting rains larger than that. And if you get an awful lot of intensity, sometimes the pumps cannot keep up with it. Hammond is so flat, everything has to be pumped. If you get a pump failure, if you get any kind of issues in the system, blockage, we've seen debris intentionally dropped into sewers in the city of Hammond. Somebody will open up a manhole, drop a tie in there from the railroad tracks, stuff like that. We've pulled tires out of our sewers, all kind of things, especially in the isolated areas where somebody can actually get away with something like that. It's a constant fight to try to maintain capacity in the system. Typically now we get maybe a handful of basement backups during a major storm event. We had, back when Tom's father was mayor, we had one year we had like 2,800 basement backups throughout the city. It was just the system needed to be upgraded. We have modeled our system. We have made major improvements to it over the years. And I think it functions better than it ever has, but then we're also fighting the issues of global warming and more intense rains. You know, the rains, if you've ever been down to Florida, you see the catch basins that they have. They have huge openings in the street to pick up the water. Our system wasn't ever designed for that because we never had rains like that. So we're trying to build extra capacity. We keep tweaking the system.
And now, in your particular case, sir, why don't we could you give us the street or the block or the address, if you don't mind, or maybe you can come up and talk to Stan after. Maybe there's what we've seen on some blocks, like on California, for instance, in Hessville, there was a problem on the block. We didn't notice until we started getting complaints, which helps us try to identify if there's blockages or something.
We do have a program too where if, let's say that you are the only one on the block, and if you had multiple basement backups, we will participate with you on the installation of a backflow preventer for your basement. We'll share the cost with you.
I had that done, that backflow device. It's put in there. I haven't had a problem since.
Okay.
But I mean, and the city helped out with the cost, which was very good. But the thing is, a lot of people can't afford to put them in their basements. I mean, the city gives you $500, which was really nice. You still got to put out another $2,000 anyway. So these people.
Depends on your situation. Depending on what they have to do, because sometimes you can get them put in less expensively. Depends on what you need to solve your problem.
Anyway, Marty, do you have something you want to add?
Well, the only other thing I'd like to add to what Stan had talked about, the improvements in the larger, older sewers that we're replacing when we're doing street projects. We've also done a lot of improvements in the plant. You have to remember, this plant was built back in the early 30s, early 40s, and over the years has been added on based on the capacity that we need. The other reason why we forced our customer communities into the lawsuits that we're fighting, because of the fact they weren't paying their fair share.
Thank you.
So we've taken on a lot of burden, but it is all to help the residents of the city of Hammond. Our partners who are Munster residents also are a partner of our district, to make sure that it's just not Hammond residents, not Munster residents, carrying the burden. Because far too many years, things were ignored and neglected.
And these contracts that we enter into with our customer communities, are they 20 or 30-year contracts?
They're actually 25-year contracts.
25-year contracts, and these are just routinely entered into and approved, and that's how business has been for years and years, because CSO events were sort of There were obviously nobody was happy about it, but it just happened, and nobody regulated it. Now we have the U.S. EPA that's mandating hundreds of millions of dollars in improvements, and it sort of changed the rules of the game. So what happened is we were advised by our attorneys through the Hammond Sanitary District, to take action to cancel these contracts. Doing so resulted in litigation, which we knew would come, and it's important because Hammond residents are bearing the burden of these costs, and it's not fair. It's not fair for us to pay the largest burden and our customer communities of Whiting, Highland, and Griffith to get away with murder. They don't have to pay for it. Hammond and Munster does. That's not fair. That's why we're in this lawsuit, is we're fighting for you. Councilman at Large Dan Spitali, forgot to introduce him. Good to see you, sir. Okay, anybody have any other questions on sanitaries? Yes, sir.
Yes, am I correct in saying that the holes that were dug across from the sanitary district building was for Calumet River overflow?
Grand Calumet, exactly. That's the CSO basin we've been talking about, exactly.
Well, I noticed that they have fire heads around the holes. So are you anticipating a hazardous situation?
Good question.
Those actually are, let me just, I think one thing I need to clarify. The basin is for the combined stormwater and sewage that is coming into the plant. We're not taking water out of the river into the basin because that Grand Calumet River never ever overfloods at all. But the cannons, what we call the water cannons that you see all along the top side of the basin, is that once we dewater that within 24 hours, which is our mandate by the federal government, then the water cannons actually clean it out completely. So that's what those are.
And if we didn't, now picture what Marty's saying is the combined sewer, the combined storm and sewer water coming into the plant is more than the capacity the plant can handle. So that water is going to go someplace. And what it used to do is, instead of going into the plant, it would spill right into the river, and that river would end up going in Lake Michigan. This is the way it was done from the 30s.
From the late 20s, 30s,
till now.
it was never treated.
By the way, not just Hammond, Chicago, Gary District did the same thing. Everybody, now that's changed, and that's probably a good thing. I mean, maybe some people don't think it's a good thing. I was in China. I saw what their water looked like. It's a good thing. We should be proud of our water. However, it's big money we're talking about, and it affects all of us and all of our bills. And when these things start to change, you need to know why. It's not because, city government has some grand conspiracy to raise your sanitary rates. It's because the EPA is not asking. They tell. So, great questions. Any other questions on, and I appreciate your question to start it off. Okay.
Okay, this is about busing. Are the buses going to be coming back? It was especially helpful for the seniors and handicapped.
We have busing to a limited extent. It's not Hammond busing. It's not RBA. We have GPTC does some limited service in Hammond, a couple routes. I know up in the north part of the city, Robertsdale, Whiting area, down by Purdue Calumet. I know GPTC goes also downtown. Frank Mervan's North Township Dial-A-Ride is also a source. But as far as regular scheduled busing, I've seen no plan. And the thing is, it's a travesty because right now the only plan that regards mass transportation that we're being presented with in the city of Hammond right now is to do with the South Shore expansion. There's not a mention, and it's $600 million. The cost of that project is going to be $600 million for an 8-mile train extension. That's fact. Not a word, not a penny of that $600 million is allotted for busing. Why isn't busing included? And if we're going to spend $600 million, we're basically doing it for wealthy commuters for an 8-mile track into Dyer so that they could get to Chicago easier, which is great. I mean, if that's really what we want as a region, that's great. However, how can we ignore our disabled community, our poorest citizens that can't even get a ride from their house to that train? Anything that we do of this magnitude, when we're talking about $600 million, should be voted on by a referendum by the citizens of Lake County. By the way, the truly rotten part of this plan, the financing, is Hammond residents pay the biggest burden for this. It's $27 million over 30 years. It's ludicrous. I don't support it. The Hammond City Council doesn't support it because they passed a resolution in opposition to it. You know, the scary thing is what's going on in Indianapolis right now is they're literally trying to take the money from us because they don't want to hear our opinion. They're literally going to take the $900,000 and say, there you go, Hammond, we got the votes. And it's not legal, it's not fair, it's anti-democratic, and, you know, I just keep on saying it, I'm going to keep on saying it. You know, Lake County needs a referendum on this issue. Anytime you're talking about $600 million, it's crazy not to ask the voters what they think about it. They're doing a referendum in Munster. They did a referendum for Munster schools for $20 million. They're doing a referendum in Valparaiso for $100 million for their schools. We're doing a $600 million train, and they're force feeding us. They're just jamming it down our throat. Why? Why don't they want to know what you think? I think they're afraid of what's the answer. What if they had a referendum and we came out 75-25 and defeated the train? They have no justification for spending that sum of money. You know. Anyway, so the long-winded answer to the bus question is no. There's no plan whatsoever for countywide busing, and there should be. The only plan I hear is about a $600 million 8-mile train extension. Yes, ma'am.
Didn't isn't Gary picking up Hammond residents?
GPTC, yeah, that's GPTC.
Oh, okay.
Gary Public Transit Corporation, GPTC.
Okay.
They have, I think, 3 routes that come into Hammond, paid for through NERC, which is a board I sit on. But yeah, GPTC is the only public transit in the city of Hammond right now. Yeah.
Okay, speaking of the trains, why do they linger? I live in Hessville, and let me tell you, trying to get to work and having to wait for a stop train for 30 minutes while nobody's regulating that, and the only way to get on it is to get on the around it is to get on the expressway.
Right.
Who's able to keep track of that?
Okay, love this question. I get it a lot. All right, I can tell you first off, I've had conversations with train people, and you know what they say to the mayors of Hammond? They say, "Why did you move your city around our train line?" Meaning, what they're trying to say is, we were here first, you came second, okay? Now, I bet you my police chief could tell you story after story about what you guys do when you see a stop train. Do you mind explaining sort of your frustration as a police chief in these situations?
Well, you can imagine for us, I wish there was a viaduct or an overpass or an underpass or something at every train track because it stops emergency response. You know, before the one was built on Holman Avenue going into downtown, it was a nightmare for us. You know, people were calling for help. Officers would be separated. They wouldn't have their backup. We still get that all over the city, especially in Hessville. It's horrible. It's horrible. We write thousands of tickets. We write them all the time. My traffic supervisor writes them from his living room because he lives by the train tracks over on Parrish. Every time the train stops, he writes it and he brings it into work the next morning. It's not followed through. The tickets are somehow channeled out to county, and there's some kind of negotiation that goes on with the railroad that they pay a fine and Hammond gets no money of. So we're writing tickets that we don't receive money back on.
Is there a limit to?
Well, so let me have corporate counsel attorney jump in because she's very familiar with the county and how it works. So once HPD writes 100 tickets for a train line, Chris, what happens at that point?
What happens, okay, first of all, the state law says you can't block the intersection of the tracks for more than 10 minutes unless there is a train malfunction, which there very rarely is. You know, it hits a moose or something, whatever could possibly happen. So if there's no malfunction, they're not supposed to block for more than 10 minutes. The tickets are written, we had tried at one point to do an ordinance that made it more restrictive, less than 10 minutes, but that got thrown out by the federal court. It's only state court. What the prosecutor's office does, it waits till it gets about 50, 100, 200 tickets, and they settle them all for one price.
Which is usually what? Didn't they do like radar detectors one year?
Yeah, they sometimes.
Which is a joke, because why do you need a radar detector if all the traffic is stopped?
They trade it for stuff. They
settle them off for one price, and then that starts all over again. So really, there's no real penalty for those companies. We are surrounded by train. By garages, I understand that, and that's kind of a consequence, but when they keep you there 15, 20, I've been there 25 minutes before. I mean, there's got to be a limit to where you say, okay.
You have to understand, though, trains are more powerful than cities. Trains are more powerful than cities, for sure. Trains are more powerful than states, Chris?
Yeah, they're more powerful. They're federal. They're federally regulated.
So trains are more, so when they look at a mayor, they laugh at me. But like Mayor McDermott does not intimidate them in the slightest bit. Chief John Doty's tickets don't intimidate them in the slightest bit. They're above us.
Then what is our next step?
We build a bridge over it or a tunnel under it. That's the truth. I mean, look at what they're doing. In Munster, they have the same issues that we have here. That's really the answer. Either that, or we have to talk to Congress and the president about redefining, cities' roles with trains. It's not fair, but we live in a community that was built around train tracks. Chris, did I miss anything?
There's not much unless you want to talk to your federal congressman, but that's about it.
It's sad. They sort of laugh at us. I get stuck by the same train you do. I mean, I go around all the time. As soon as I see it, I hit Klein, go around. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but it's frustrating to say it too. Yeah, Mr. Bullock.
Mayor, as the clerk, I collect all of the monies for fines. The last settlement between the railroads, this was 3-4 years ago. The case, as Chris had said, all the tickets were sent to court, were in court. The judge threw out half of them. The other half the railroad settled on $50,000. When the check came to the city, because that's a state fine, the city of Hammond received a little over $7,000 out of that $50,000 after all the hours spent by our police officers writing tickets, sitting at those crossings. It's just totally ridiculous for the input that we give that there wasn't any relief at all for the citizens of Hammond.
It's a sad state of affairs. It's a frustrating thing. I learned about this when I first became mayor because the settlement at that time, I think it was for equipment, radar detectors. And I thought it was so funny that we're getting radar detectors, but nobody could speed because we're all stopped. It's just, so anyway. Yes, sir, George.
Can I go back to an earlier subject?
Sure.
Thread here. Do you contemplate challenging the, coercion by the legislation for the South Shore train in the event they just ram it down everybody's throat?
Well, it depends on the final form it takes. We have protections in the Indiana Constitution that say you cannot treat cities different from other cities. It's called special legislation. Chris, and I knew routinely they get around this provision because they don't define it. Like they say cities with a population of
between 73,000 and 79.
And it only applies to one city.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you think of?
What are we talking about? The train?
The train. George is saying, do you anticipate trying to challenge any legislation that comes out that forcibly forces Hammond to participate in this?
In the South Shore expansion? Well, first of all, until the environmental impact study comes out, I mean, this is all just kind of pie in the sky. This is like saying, when I go on a cruise, I'm going to go on this cruise line. Nothing's happening. Until that environmental impact study is done, we really don't know anything. So they can maybe put some mechanisms in place, but it may turn out that the federal funding allocated is insufficient to cover their portion once the environmental impact study comes out. It might come out to be $800 million. Their chunk of change just isn't enough. So, I mean, I'm going to start worrying about it when I see what the environmental impact study says. But in the meantime, of course, we do have our lobbyists always protecting the interests of the city of Hammond and Indianapolis.
And we do. We have a really good lobby team down there. But the scary thing is it doesn't really work well, even though it's in the Constitution. A lot of laws that they pass are special legislation, but they get around it by not. They wouldn't say Hammond. They would say a city with more than 81,000 but less than 82,000. And there's only one city in the state it applies to. And they're like, well, if another city gets more than 81 and less than 82, it would apply to them too. And by the way, what they're doing right now with rental registration is special legislation. It's legislation that applies to Hammond only. And that's not stopping them. So.
That's what I'm wondering. Is there a basis for a challenge that could?
We will. We're in litigation on that issue as we speak, but they're trying to preempt that litigation with legislation. So, okay, doing well. Anybody have any more written questions? Please go over to Eva and Jill.
I've got a question. You can solve the railroad question if you take all the crossing guards and have them stop the trains instead of the cars.
Just flip them around, right?
And these locomotives are so big now that the trains are very long.
We're working on that. We're going to flip them around. I like that. I like it. Thank you.
You were talking about the train, and we did have someone who mentioned that they are fully behind the referendum for the South Shore.
Thank you.
Wanted to make a comment.
I think it's preposterous that we're talking about spending this sum of money without public input. think it's preposterous. I think the more people that sign on to that bandwagon, the better off we're all going to be. It's hard to justify what they're doing without a referendum. It doesn't happen in other parts of the state. If they were doing this in Indianapolis, there would no doubt there would be a referendum. If you remember correctly, a few years ago, didn't we have a referendum on transit that widely failed up here? Or was supposed to have a referendum? You remember that, Chris? Oh, but anyway, by the way, when we wanted to have...
to get on the ballot. I think that's what happened. I think
It was, yeah, it was something, yeah. But when we wanted to have gaming in Northwest Indiana, we had to have a referendum. It's big questions like that are answered by referendum. This is $600 million, so. All right, next question.
This question is for the police department.
Great.
Why do the Hammond Police Department need 3 to 4 patrols per stop? I manage a property across the street from the PD. Why is the response time in excess of 45 minutes?
Well, with every traffic stop, it's different. I can't say that 3 cars aren't needed because that's only 3 officers. If you got 4 people in a car and they think there's a gun in the car, then I think 3 officers is appropriate. I know I make traffic stops myself, and all my guys, I hear them all the time. If I pull over a car, once I approach it, if I see there's one person in the car and I don't deem them to be a threat, I call traffic only. That's our protocol. The backup officer that was coming, which is usually one, will turn off and go back to his beat or keep doing what he was doing. So my first response would be if there's 3 or 4 there, there's probably a reason. We don't arbitrarily just do that. We don't pull cars off other beats unless there's an officer in jeopardy as a general rule. And the response time near City Hall, 45 minutes. I would say that's very unusual for us if it's that high, unless it's a very busy day, unless we're involved in a crime scene. You know, if we had a homicide or some other type of violent crime, a robbery, we could be tied up. We could be involved in something else that might slow a response to a non-emergency call. That's the way I'd have to answer that one.
Okay, questions about the police department? A good topic. Yes, ma'am.
I had an incident, and to be perfectly honest, it was great the amount of police officers that came when the incident that I had came about. Every single police officer that was there was respectful, did their job, and thoroughly investigated everything. So if you see just 1 police car or 2 police cars, you should feel so lucky that we live in a city where they come and help you when there's an emergency.
Thank you.
Questions about the police? Seems like at the end of 2014, this is all anybody was talking about. I was very happy when the holidays hit. I think it gave us all the time to reflect a little bit and try to like reanalyze. And I know there's a lot of strong feelings about what's going on in America, understandably so. You know, this is a tough issue, and it's something that we've tackled and we're continuing to address. And any other questions on police? Yes, ma'am. Eastside Community Council?
To meet the police, but I think the kids had games, but it was real nice. And the new policemen that you have, they was real nice, real manable. Even the old ones, they was too. So I think that's a good thing if you do that. I think that is a good thing to do.
Okay.
And I think your captain of police, I think that's a good thing so the kids can, and the community, get familiar with the police, they face and everything. I think that was a good thing that you did.
Thank you very much.
The chief of police.
Thank you. You know, right after, you know, when all the incident with Ferguson and Hammond was going on, we had a community meeting. It was 2 hours, there's literally 300 or 400 people there. A lot of issues came out. I want you to know that, you know, we went back and analyzed the way we do business. And quite frankly, Chief, since we're talking about this, I know that we analyzed the way we were testing, and maybe the way we're testing is not helping us get more, you know, diversity in our police department. And I know that you and I talked about this and implemented a change that may help us down the road get more qualified applicants, you know, maybe from Hammond or maybe from a particular community into the Hammond Police Department. Could you talk a little bit about that?
some years ago, we had a system put in place by an ad hoc committee to make it equal for everybody to get a chance. A testing procedure out of Indianapolis was put in place, and you had to get 70%, which back then was a B.
And JD, that was before I took over as mayor.
Yes.
You know, this is like going back into the 90s,
That was under
right?
Mayor Dilo.
Right. This is back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, and so that was instituted, and it did make it fair. You had to pass the test, you had to do an interview, and you were put on a point scale by this firm in Indianapolis. Times changed, the grading curve changed, and 70 really became kind of a D, and 80 was like the new B. So what happened was, during the interim, somebody changed that test to an 80, and actually 70 would have been a C. So they changed it to an 80. And what we found happening over the years, and it's kind of a nationwide problem, is college grads came in and they've been schooled in interview techniques, they're recently taken tests, and they were just outscoring everybody else across the board who hadn't had the same opportunities. So if you hadn't gone to college, let's say you graduated high school, good person, hard worker, and you go out and get a job till you're 21, till you're old enough to be a police officer. You could be the most ethical, honest person in the world. Maybe you got B's and C's in school. You weren't the best test taker, but you're still a great person, would make a great police officer. You weren't going to have a chance coming up against just the college kids. So what we've done with the test is we've just made it pass-fail, and we've moved it down to 70. That'll give us a larger pool of people to choose from, hopefully get more Hammond residents involved, and get more blue-collar people in, quite frankly. Because college people, just because you go on to college doesn't automatically, it doesn't make you a better police officer. It shows you have aptitude, and it's nice that you went out and did that, but that piece of paper doesn't mean a lot to me when you're riding around on a squad car. It's your character, it's your work ethic, that's what I'm really looking at. The piece of paper is nice, you don't get paid extra for having it. It's nice you stayed busy for those years, but I don't think we should count out the guys that were, working with their hands in the garage who might make a good police officer 3 years later also.
So, that's one of the most direct examples of stuff we're trying to do, and the new officers we bring in, we're trying to bring in a lot more diversity into our department because of credibility issues. We don't want any particular community in Hammond feeling like, they're not just as important as any other part of the city, because that's not true, and we're doing everything we can to regain credibility that we may have lost during this whole situation. I don't ever want to see Hammond on CNN again. Those were not fun times. So, any other questions on this? It seems like I'm going to bring up one, and then, if you don't mind, one of the recent things that the council's been faced with lately is over the last 2 meetings, a repeated call by a couple of different council people to put a moratorium on jaywalking in school zones. And, I mean, jaywalking is a state law. Attorney Cantor, right? We're enforcing state law, and a lot of times using a federal grant to enforce jaywalking. One of the most common complaints I get as your mayor is how much Hammond residents hate it when kids jaywalk and stop traffic. This is something I constantly hear. And when I hear for these calls to stop jaywalking, I say, well, what other laws don't you want us to enforce? Do you want us to not enforce Illinois license plates in school zones? Do you want us not to write tickets when people speed through school zones, or are we just picking jaywalking? I feel bad for the council because it's election year, and that's why these issues are coming up, and certain people are trying to make other council people look like they're, not sympathetic. And that's just not the case. It's the law of Indiana. You cannot jaywalk. And our officers do their job, and they enforce the law, which is what they're sworn to uphold. I just think this is a distraction, and the whole purpose is to try to divide us, one group from the other. And I applaud the council for standing up and supporting the Hammond Police Department. It's literally 2 council people that are pushing this issue, and the other 7 are saying, no, we're not going to go down that road. So thank you very much to the Hammond City Council for standing strong on that issue. Yes, sir.
But I was wondering, have you actually changed the tests that you give to applicants? Does every applicant take the same test?
We're not changing the test, and it's still going to be handled through the same firm, Indianapolis, who would do the grading, so that, to verify that it's done accurately and there's no malfeasance or nobody's, messing with the test. That you outsource that. You do that for a reason, just to keep everything above board. The only thing we did was ask them to make it a pass-fail. Could they do that legally? Is it okay? Yes. The answer was yes. We lowered the pass-fail line a little bit just to get a larger pool of people.
And what it does is, when I took over as mayor, the chief at the time was Brian Miller, who's a very idealistic chief. He was a great chief. Brian was very idealistic about being a police officer. It's a fair statement, right? And if Brian was right in front of me, I'd say it. And one of the things he always loved about the police hiring process was hands off, mayor. We're hiring police officers. This is probably one of the most sacred things you're going to do as your mayor. So we want to make sure if you scored a 99 on that test, you're probably one of the first officers we're going to hire. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So what we've done, and the thing is, so after years of idealism in hiring police officers, imagine my horror when I'm getting blamed because my police department doesn't reflect properly the community. And I agree, it doesn't reflect properly the community. But I said, but wait, but we're really idealistic about the officers we hire. It doesn't work. So what JD's talking about is it's going to give us more latitude on who we hire. Which, in this case, if I'm going to be held responsible for the outcome, you got to give me a little bit more latitude when we hire. And I think that's what we're saying is give us a chance to, if, let's say a Hammond resident is number 15 on a list and we're hiring 10 officers, maybe we can pick number 15 under this. Maybe, out of the first 10, there aren't enough diverse applicants in there. Maybe we could drop down and pick up another diverse applicant that wasn't in the top 10. This is going to give us the ability to make the police department more diverse and more reflective of our community.
JD, do we have any benefits for like hiring officers that were veterans in that?
We have a point system, and currently it's you get a point for college, point for military service, so it does help.
We do have a lot of veterans, right, JD?
We do.
Like yourself, for instance.
Yeah, like when I came on, you either came from the steel mill or you came from the military. It was a kind of a phase we're going through. We were just after a couple wars, and there was still the volunteer. I was not at the wars, so I'm not quite that old. The military is very, very popular and very strong back then.
What percentage of the department do you think is veterans?
I would say we're in the 30% at least.
Yeah, there are a lot of veterans.
It's kind of a...
In fact, you had one of your officers that actually, while he was a police officer, went overseas to Iraq, I believe, right?
Yeah, we've had several officers go. We had 1, 2, 3 tours. He left us 3 times and then came back. So it's very common for us to get that. It's kind of a natural leap. Military, police is kind of paramilitary, so it's kind of the same thing. They feel comfortable here. I know I made the jump from the Army to here, and it was easy transition for me.
Okay. Any other questions about the Hammond Police Department?
We do actually have another question.
Sure.
There is an ongoing and alarming surge of violence in Hammond that seems to be coming from East Chicago, Gary, and Chicago. Even peaceful neighborhoods in South Hammond are being affected. What is the plan to combat this violence, and are we seeing areas bordering Gary and East Chicago?
I can tell you, before I pass off to the chief, from my view, it seems like we do have a disturbing amount of crime coming over our border, where we notice a lot of our crime. And at this point, we've noticed an increase in Hessville, which is disturbing. In fact, we've responded since to that uptick as well. We believe a lot of that crime is, in fact, coming from Black Oak section of Gary, if not Gary itself. But Chief, I'll go ahead and let you expand.
Yeah, Hessville's been affected most recently by probably East Chicago because there's been we had 3 homicides that happened in Hessville this year that were directly attributable to gangs that reside in East Chicago.
Yeah, that one in the alley in Hessville, they were driving down Klein from East Chicago, shooting each other, and they parked their car once one of them passed away, right?
So that was 2, and then the one before that at the apartment complex on Grand was related also to that same gang. What we're doing is we have additional patrols already. We've reallocated some of our resources, and we're going to put a new patrol out in Hessville. Right now we're looking at crime cameras at every major exit point from Hammond and try to catch the vehicles and plates of people coming into Hammond that we will be able to pull up right after a crime so we can identify people coming in here and doing something bad and leaving. That's something we're on top of right now. We currently do have 5 cameras, but they're kind of internal cameras at problem areas in the city, but we're looking at 10 or 11 more right now. 3 alone are going to go in Hessville, and there is one going to go in South Hammond as you go onto the highway, because we get, people will come off the highway out of Illinois and they'll commit a few robberies over there, and then they exit out right away, you know.
But these cameras that we're talking about could literally, we could focus the camera on where your license plate would be. So that if we knew a house got robbed at 4:20 in the afternoon and the car fled, if it goes by one of our cameras, we could catch the license plate and theoretically get that person, unless of course the car was stolen.
You know, we can't keep, you know, crime from coming in. But one thing Hammond is very good at, the officers are, my officers, I'm very proud of them, is we catch a lot of people. We do. We solve a lot of crime. We catch a lot of burglars and they go to jail. Go to Lake County and ask them who brings in all the bad guys. We do. Our guys are aggressive, they're out there doing their job, and they're working hard for you. And this is just another tool to help them do a better job.
I always try to describe this whole situation as, you know, it's like a war, literally. And we have an army, and we put it out there. It's a well-equipped army, and they're motivated. And, you know, we're going to win a lot of the battles, and they're going to win some battles too. And it's, in the long run, they're going to lose because we have more resources than they do. Yeah.
Is there a way or a list that you can get to request cameras in certain areas? Like, I live in Hessville, so Kennedy Avenue, which is a big spot, 169th, 165th. Are there any information on where those cameras would be located at?
Well, the first three are going to be on, the first one is 169th at the Klein Service Road. It's going to be 177th, which turns into 25th Avenue in Gary. And the other one is going to be as you exit on Kennedy. And then we are asking for a fourth one. But
into East Chicago.
Into East Chicago.
So when you think about what the chief is focusing on is the exit points of our city.
Right.
Because theoretically, if somebody is coming into our city from East Chicago, robbing a house in Hessville, and they take Kennedy back home, we're gonna catch their license plate on the way out.
And the reason I'm asking, there's so many businesses up and down Kennedy that I do know the business owners and things like that. And with all of the bars located in that location, as you can imagine, weekends, you know, holidays, things like that. I mean, for the businesses, I'm sure that would be a somewhere closer to where they would be able to get more
at the north end of Kennedy there, we have a lot of accidents, OWI type accidents after the bars get out. And we had a couple bars down there that for a while were having a lot of shootings. We haven't had anything recently, but we did have them. And it's calmed down a little bit, but pretty sure that that's a good camera location down there, right where the Hammond Police Range is. So we can catch them as going over the bridge there and get them going out and coming in.
And these aren't cheap either. So like when we commit to 3, you know, my first look was over to my city controller because I know we're gonna have to find the money for these things. But these are well thought out where these locations are. And the other 5 that we've deployed throughout the city have worked very well. And I anticipate these 3 are gonna help us a lot. And it's a war. Like I said, we're gonna keep on fighting. I can tell you the Hammond Police Department, they get more, they have $25 million budget. We only get $22 million in property tax revenue. They get more in the Hammond Police Department than we collect in all of our property taxes from all of our sources in Hammond. Okay, so when I hear people say, do you support the police, the actions speak louder than words. This is a department that we have not cut since I've been your mayor. We have 210 police officers. That's the way, I like that number in our city. It's a good number. And it's an attainable number. We can keep doing it. We got to support our police officers. And we got to figure out ways to finance it to make it work. So we have another question over here. Yes, sir. Hammond Police Department seems to be the topic.
Yeah, this is for the, excuse me.
It's okay.
Yes, this is for the chief of police. At the corner of Michigan and Columbia, when you're coming down the bridge, going north, there's an island right there to make a right-hand turn. Well, there's a sign on the light pole that says no turn on red. I believe that it's been misplaced. It should be on no turn on red going west on Michigan. Because why would a no turn on red sign be there when we have an island to make a right-hand turn?
Okay, we'll take a look at it tomorrow. Steve, you got that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I just wrote it down. I'll have our sign guy, our traffic guy.
That's a public works question. So, thank you. Okay, we have any more issues on the police department? Questions in the back?
Is there any results from that shooting at Parrish and Martha? Nothing's in the newspaper about it.
We know what happened, but we don't know what happened since. We know
less than a block away.
We know the kid ran, whoever did it, ran towards the apartments on 169th, Unless his car was parked there and he was headed to East Chicago, it probably didn't make any difference. What's happened? You know, I know one of our neighbors had their security cameras, somebody looked at them, but we still don't know whatever happened from that. And that happened within a block of our house.
And I appreciate your concern, but usually if we're not saying what happened, it's because there's an investigation ongoing and we can't yet. When we get to the point, we would definitely release that information. So we just can't talk about cases while they're ongoing because we can't reveal details of the case.
There was one on Marshall that just happened, and there was a shooting on Marshall that just happened yesterday, I think, or today. It's really, it is getting carried away. Whatever we could do to help, we'll do.
Well, I appreciate it, and just be vigilant and call us always. And I believe the one on Marshall, was that problem family over there?
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah. But we're well aware of them. One of them was recently incarcerated by us and is freshly in jail.
Hopefully they're not watching Go Hammond TV right now.
We're not going to mention any names tonight. And but there's another one and a couple players, they're friends over there, so we're always on that. We have been on that, and the recent incarceration is going to be helpful.
But this begs a larger question also is, you know, is this a Hammond only problem or is this a societal problem? You know, we have shootings all the time now. It's when are we going to come to grips in America with the fact that something needs to be done? And I'm not advocating one or the other, but we have a proliferation of guns in our country, and now we have a proliferation of shootings. I mean,
all across the country, and when I have properties that have issues, I was a turnover manager. I would come in and I would clean out properties.
I did it in East San Jose, I did it in East Palo Alto, I did it in Illinois, I've done it all over the place. The property that's at 169th, the apartment complex that's over there, there's got to be some more involvement because people are coming, they're robbing the liquor store and going across the street. Not the liquor store, the convenience store. And it's as obvious as can be. These kids are hanging out there, they're moving in, and the nice people who have that Mexican restaurant, they just sort of gave up their parking lot. I'm not telling you what to do, but if it was me, I'd step on the toes of that apartment complex and say, manage it.
Well, you know, as a manager of an apartment complex, what can we do? Because I manage a different apartment complex, but what can we do to work with the city of Hammond or with the police department in order to, whatever you need as far as resident information? We do criminal background screens, but it makes no difference if they're going to run right back into our property to somebody. So what is it that you need from us, or you know, community involvement as far as talking to the residents to say, hey, you want a safer community? This is what we ask of you. And I would be more than willing to have any of those meetings at my property complex across the street from the Hammond Police Station.
we don't have a lot of problems with the one with Douglas Point. I mean, we really don't. I mean,
I'm pretty
but,
sure we're pretty.
No, seriously. You know, and the thing about apartment complexes is we have a history of, you know, when we have problems, we try to make moves, and we have, you know.
And I'm more than willing to do anything that needs to be done to
Right.
keep it that way.
Okay. Do we have problems? What's the one on 69th? Is it Brook Forest?
Kennedy Crossing.
Kennedy Crossing. Yeah.
I believe that's recently been purchased by respectable apartment owners. I think
Do you have a lot of problems with them, Cal?
it's increasing. The tenant, type of tenant has changed also. I believe rental registration is the backbone of that. Updating tenant information as tenants leave and new ones come in, having that information, because if we're looking for someone, or if we know they're in there, having that information, having the phone numbers, having that contact information can be vital. We get asked all the time about reciprocity, Illinois plates. Your tenants come in, have them change the plates, okay? That's something that needs to be done, something they're obligated to do anyway. That information can easily be transferred. As you know, police department, fire department share our Zone Pro registration information. They have access to that without even have to come to us. On the larger apartment complexes, we keep those names on file for us because it's just too much to enter into the system. You'd have 700 people under one address. So updating that information, keeping us updated on information, making them change their plates over so there's not the reciprocity problem, I believe is a great way to be able to have that information that we need.
Well, I will tell you, if you are ever looking for somebody in my area, please feel free to come to my office and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you.
I've been mayor 11 years. I've never had an issue with Douglas Point, ever. I mean,
You're not supposed to do that, all right? If you're housing strict rules.
Mhm.
All right, and you can't say, I'm going to restrict my residency. It can't be done that way. There's ways to pressure complex. There's an old expression that stuff floats. And the fact is that if you guys check out the property thoroughly, real thoroughly, if you have the inspectors there, you have everybody there,
Stuff floats, and the people who are a problem will float.
Okay.
All right, and when it happens, it will resolve itself. And that management needs to be informed that you guys are going to stand on their throats until things are done right. They're affecting property values for all of that area. There are several police officers that are around the back of that property that have houses there. I've done their roofs, all right, and I know that this is not an area that should be forgotten. You guys should stand on this and really find a way, if it's through code enforcement, if it's through inspections. You have the rental inspection policy here. This city was one of the first in the area to do that. And beat them with a club, make it happen, because if they're not going to fix that area, it'll all fall.
Okay.
When we took over Hickory Ridge Apartments from Gary, it was the same kind of thing.
Okay.
You've got to understand, stay on top of it.
All right, I appreciate it.
I do believe, Mayor, that management knows very well where their problem tenants are, and if it does float, they know where it's at, they know where it's floating.
Okay. All right.
Anything ever been done about the urban blight? There's a abandoned gas station at 169th and the Boulevard, and one on Kennedy at 169th, on both on the northwest corner.
Mhm.
They've been there for about 7 years, closed.
Longer than that.
And I've seen they've remediated the property.
You know, a lot of times gas stations purchase other gas stations just to shut them down so that you go to their gas station. We've seen that actually in Hammond. I'm not going to name companies, but that's a strategy gas stations use. Phil?
Right here.
Hey.
Hello. Both gas stations that you brought up, it's ironic that you're bringing them up right now. The one on 169th in Indianapolis had contamination issues. So even though you saw a for sale sign on the gas station for a long time, the truth is the owners couldn't sell the property until they remediated it and cleaned it up. I received information that just recently they did get a clean bill from IDEM. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I heard from the realtor who's listing the property. So if that's the case, I think you're going to see something happen at that site. I think that the property probably will sell fairly quickly because there's been interested parties that have contacted the city as well as the owner of the property. So something could happen there soon. As far as the Kennedy and 169th property, the city has received a site plan from the owner. We're reviewing it right now. The plan only calls for a building. It doesn't say who the tenant of the building is going to be. So right now we're reviewing that. And so the good news is, I would think, hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, you'll actually see some positive improvements at both of those sites.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, Leanne?
In reference to the Kennedy crossing, I just moved to 2 blocks away from there. And I used to live on 165th, now I'm on 167th in Kansas. Been circling, there's a police officer that also lives on that block. I used to work with him when I were a dispatcher, so we go back. So we're circling and we're keeping each other informed and we're aware of it. I just barely moved there a couple weeks ago. I did live in Hesville on 165th. So we're in the process of keeping ourselves an eye out. There's always people walking through there and going into those apartments. So my thing is, like in other cities, when there's so many violations coming through there or crime, they have had people have to put a security booth for everybody that goes in and comes out of there. So I don't know at what point we could force them to do that. But us as a community, we have been, and I've been talking to the neighbors around there, that we are seeing people that don't live in the area to right away call me or call the police officer so we could try to calm the things down and get these people out of the area.
Thank you. Okay, Leanne, next question.
This question is about the bike paths. What is the status on the trails and the paths near Hessville? What's the status on the grant money that was discussed at one of the mayor's night outs last year? And will the residents or businesses in the area be able to provide input on where they should be located?
Okay, bike trails in Hessville is a great question. When you look at the way the bike trails are laid out in Hammond, it mostly follows the old rail lines. Erie Lackawanna is our main trail, the Monon being the other side of that main trail. The problem with Erie, Lackawanna, and the Monon is the Monon goes through South Hammond, Erie, Lackawanna goes through the Woodmar section from downtown. We don't really have any good trail system into Hessville, and we're trying to fix that. So I'm going to pass the buck over to Stan, our city engineer, talk a little bit about this, talking about how we could make Hessville a part of our bike trail system.
Yeah, we have a master plan for the bike trail system throughout the city, and we've been acquiring federal funds to build segments of it. Right now, we're completing a segment up by Wolf Lake. We've got the segment that was completed last year through the North Hammond neighborhood on the NIPSCO right-of-way, and that'll be extended all the way down and tie into a trail over in East Chicago. We have some tentative trails. One of them is adjacent to the Gibson Nature Center. I think that's what it's called, right? The Gibson Nature Center. And there's a loop running through the Hessville neighborhood that is planned for the future, which will take you from the north-south trail right near Kennedy Avenue that's going to tie in East Chicago, take you through the Gibson Woods, take you down near Klein Avenue, and there's an area there that it'll come down to 173rd Street. We're also going to have trails within Dowling Park. The first phase will be built and ready to use sometime this summer, and the second phase will be under construction and possibly completed this year or next year at the latest. But we are looking at trying to have trails available within about a half a mile of everyone's home, that you'll be able to get on a trail and travel on your bicycle.
I can give you a sneak preview of something we're working on right now. We've only had a couple meetings on it, but it's a mountain bike course. It would be located in Hessville. I think MX in here, I'm not going to point out who MX is. I think he knows what the area we're talking about, but it's a really awesome area where we're analyzing whether or not we can convert it into a mountain bike course, which would be easily accessible by residents of Hessville. And it's really the only opportunity we have in the city of Hammond to do something like this. So I hope it works out, but it is definitely located in Hessville. So can't say much more at this point, because we have a lot of work to do if it's going to happen, but we're eyeballing a project I think Hessville would be very proud of. So.
Is this on Go Hammond? Is this on the site?
No. So what I just said or what Stan just said?
What Stan just said.
Stan, is that on Go Hammond? We should. I don't know. Maybe we should find out. Sure. Can you give me? I'll make sure it's on Go Hammond. I'll take care of it tomorrow. Okay. If it's not. But yeah, it's the master bike trail plan. Okay. We'll get it on there tomorrow. Thanks, Stan.
It's a part of our GIS system, so Mickey should be able to put it on Go Hammond if it's not on there yet.
Is it, Chris? Here. Could you pass that down to Chris? We're still old fashioned how we do business, so we'll make sure that it's on there tomorrow, okay? If it's not already. But it's the master bike trail plan. It's what we operate off of, and obviously Hessville is an important part of the city. It's just a little bit more challenging for us to get the east-west connection out to Hessville, and that's what we're working on. So, one of the things I talked about is maybe 173rd is one of those. I don't know if that's where we've gone with this yet, but we're doing a project in North Hammond. So anyway, we're working on it. Any questions about bike trails? It's one of our great assets in Hammond. If there's one good thing about having rail lines in the city is when the rail lines become abandoned, they're excellent bike trails. It's a common practice in the Midwest is to convert old rail lines into bike trails. We have really an excellent bike trail network in our city. It's something to be very proud of, and once we get done building it out, it's going to be a huge asset for our city. So, and by the way, YM Bike Ride, takes off at midnight. It's usually the first week of August. The second, was that right on?
No, it's going to be the second one now because of things that were changed in Chicago.
We didn't want to. Lollapalooza. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I was wondering why you announced it back. It's the 8th. Thank you. Because we always competed with Lollapalooza. And if you go to Lollapalooza, this is your sweet spot. The all-night bike rides in Lollapalooza directly conflict with each other. So we wanted to get the people that went to Lollapalooza to participate in WHAM. So we moved it back to the 8th/9th, right, of August. So there was 1,000 riders last year. It's a great time, right all over the city. So any other questions on bike trails? Yes, ma'am.
It's not necessarily on bike trails, but it's park related.
Okay.
We talked about possibly a second dog park.
A second dog park?
Dog park, yeah. Are you guys looking at possibly the South Hammond area?
Well,
One more.
we're working on one in South Hammond right now.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, in the 4th District, Councilman Emerson's district, in Riverside Park. That's where our first dog park's gonna be located. Donna, you know enough about this project yet to jump in, or?
So closer to Munster area? We were talking about maybe closer to the Purdue Cal.
Well,
South
it's,
area.
okay. No, I mean, it's a great idea. Anytime you do something for the first time, it's hard. Like when we did our first skateboard park, it took me like 2 years to get it done. And now I can do a skateboard park in a week because nobody cares about it now. Anytime you do something for the first time, it's way harder than the second, third, or fourth time. We had to actually jump through a lot of hoops. This is our property, the Riverside Park, and we had to jump through a lot of hoops just to get this first one up and running. And I think once it's up and running, it's going to be easier for us to replicate in other parts of the city. But I wanted to introduce Donna real quick. She is our she's been with the city ever since I've been with the city, basically. But Donna has recently taken over as the superintendent of the Hammond Parks Department, and I wanted to congratulate her. So let's give Donna a big round of applause. So she's getting acclimated to her new job, and she was previously working in the 1st District for Public Works Department. Before that, she served time as Special Events Coordinator running Mayor's Night. She's an excellent worker. She's going to do a great job in our park system. I don't know how familiar you are with this project because you just jumped in.
I know we have some earth moving to do and some fencing to install that can't be done until the weather breaks. But it should be done shortly thereafter.
This is a unique project because we're doing basically all the work ourselves. You know, we have very trained and qualified people, and this is basically like an earth moving fencing project. Greg Gleason, the Director of Public Works, has been helping out a lot. Leanne, could you run over there and sort of give us an update, Gary?
Actually, we had some area over there. Instead of having contractors come in and do it, just before winter, we took our equipment over there, tore out all the old stuff, took it out, leveled the ground the best we could, filled it all in with a lot of dirt that we had stored we weren't using for a while. Got it all leveled now. We've got it all marked off, and then when the spring comes, we'll go in, level it a little more, and then, like Donna said, the fence will come in. So majority of the work for this dog park is done within the city with no cost.
I know I was criticized by a certain person on the council that's running against me that we're spending millions of dollars on this project, and I laugh because this dog park is a bang for your buck project. Literally the most expensive part is the fence.
That's it, because the dirt was even given to us from the old Cherville golf course out in Cherville. Said, if you guys want it, take it, and it was very good dirt. So we said, yeah, we'll take it. And it's set for a lot of years since, you know, it's been torn down. So even the fill is free.
So basically, to answer your question, ma'am, once this dog park proves to be a success, which I know it will be, it's going to be way easier for me to go to another part of the city. I live in the part of the city you're talking about, by the way, but I imagine up in this part of the city, you know, I think this is going to be a huge hit, and we're going to be looking to replicate it across the city. So thank you for the question. Okay.
Okay, this is a comment
Did you have one? I'm sorry, Myla. Oh, I thought you had one. Jack, you had something? Oh, okay. Sorry.
No? Okay. This is a comment for personnel/parks. When we hire for the summer recreation program, it might be a good idea to consider School City of Hammond workers because they already have a relationship with the students.
Great idea. Donna?
I'm open to that. Anyone who's interested can contact us. We'll probably be taking our applications April 1st. Come to the Civic Center.
And I can tell you one thing we were talking about today. I know Mylan and Donna do this every year for me. Do you know a student that would be a good enough swimmer to become lifeguard certified? Because if you do, we have a great opportunity for them to have a great job wearing their bathing suit every single day working for the City of Hammond, which is a great job in my book. You could be a lifeguard on open water up at the Hammond Port Authority, or you could be a lifeguard in one of our pools working for the City of Hammond, for the City of Hammond's Park Department. We constantly are up against this, a lack of qualified lifeguards. So if you know strong swimmers, you know, members of the swim team, anybody that's willing to become, you know, lifeguard certified, we're constantly looking for Hammond residents to fill these spots. I absolutely hate going outside of Hammond to fill these spots, and we sometimes have to do it. Yeah, because we can't fill the spots with qualified people, which is ridiculous to me. So if you know somebody that's a strong swimmer and somebody young, so yeah, Myla?
You know, at one point, Mayor, we also offered, when they have to take the life-saving course, the port would actually pay for that course at the Y, so long as they signed up for a couple-year hitch to be with us for 2 summers.
Donna and I were talking about the same exact thing right before Mayor's Night.
It has to happen.
We need strong swimmers. It's a good job in the summertime. So if you're son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter, son or daughter's friend, whatever, we need people to get qualified. So, do you have a question, ma'am?
No, I was just asking if you're certified.
Certified at the Y. Okay. All right.
The class is in May, I think around the 16th. I know for sure it's at the South Lake Y. We want the Hammond Y to do as well, so I'm working on that. I really want juniors and seniors in high school because then that would allow us to keep the pools open longer, where the kids don't go back to college in early August and I'm short on lifeguards and I have to close. So if you know a junior or senior that would be a good lifeguard, send them my way. Hammond Civic Center, 853-6378.
Thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
That was my question. I was the one who wrote that because you have adults and there's some in here that work for School City of Hammond and they work with the kids.
Yes.
The kids are familiar with their faces. So to me, it'd be better for someone that works with these kids every day. They know their situation to hire them for the work for the summer program with these kids. Because I know one summer, it was some contractors from working for BP, and they was at the Maywood Park, and they was so generous, they brought hot dogs and everything, took them to the White Sox Park, chartered a bus, and was looking for a lot of kids. And they took them, gave them $30 a piece, and they took them to the White Sox game. And I thought that was nice. And they was contractors for BP, and they also went to our church at New Hope in Hammond,
Oh, that's nice.
where our pastor is Reverend Pope.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I believe this is the last question coming up.
Yes, there's a question for you. What are your thoughts on open enrollment in the schools?
I learned early on that, well, first off, I think it's sort of frustrating that I think a mayor should be more involved in public schools than they are. Because my job is so closely linked to what happens in Irving School and all the schools across the city. However, the way Indiana law is set up, I have literally zero input on how schools are run, other than showing up to classrooms and talking to kids, which I do a lot of. So I don't really feel like I should wade into this very much because, I'm sure there's a lot of arguments for and against, but I do know that Hammond Public Schools and Hammond Public School teachers are facing challenges we've never had to face before, just like we are at city government with a lack of money and the same need, and it's hard. It's hard for the library district, it's hard for the civil city, it's hard for the schools. I said this earlier today and I'm going to say it again. My tax bill used to be $4,500 a year. My tax bill dropped down to $2,000 when we put the tax caps in. Wonderful, I saved $2,500. But all that savings that we all got from all of our tax cap savings added together equals millions and millions of dollars that used to fund government. It's not there anymore. We still have the same needs. Last time I checked, Hammond residents liked having 210 police officers. Hammond residents liked having a professional fire department. Hammond residents enjoy all the services all these other departments offer. The hard part is when you're losing millions of dollars in revenue, how to keep offering the services that you expect.
Was it 1, 2, 3 by referendum?
Yes, sir. 1, 2, 3 was by referendum. Overwhelmingly approved too, Mylan. 75-25, if I remember correctly. So most of the people in this room, logic would say, voted for tax caps. That's fine. We all save money as a result. However, you can't get mad at the mayor when, because we are running out of money, we have to make unpopular decisions. That's all I'm saying. I tell you what, we have not compromised on is public safety. I mean, we haven't cut one police officer since I've been your mayor. We haven't laid off a single fireman. We've reduced the number of firemen, but we haven't laid off a single fireman. Every other department you see up here has been dramatically affected by the tax caps. Some departments, like Donna's department, lost 50% of their people from when I first took over as mayor. Gary's department, before the merger, had lost, do you remember, Gary? You lost 70 people? I mean, so what we did, instead of laying off a police officer, we would lay off 20 of Gary's guys. which stinks when it snows, you know, because these guys are the ones that help us out. So it's been challenging. So I guess what my answer to that question is, we all have so many challenges. It's hard for me to wade in on that, and I respect what they do at Irving and School City Hammond. I think School City Hammond's doing a good job as of late. I really do. I think they're moving in the right direction and helps me out with my job, and I appreciate it. So, and again, I want to say thank you very much to Irving Principal, Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Gomez also, thank you very much, Mrs. Gomez. Wonderful. Thanks for letting us come to Irving. I want to thank the host councilman, Councilman Jackie Lackey. Thank you very much, Councilman.
Actually, Mayor, before we wrap up, sorry, I do have a comment from Janet Wortman from the American Cancer Society.
Oh, okay. Hi, Janet.
Hello, Mayor. We've had a couple meetings, but I wanted to personally say thank you to you for being our event sponsor and coming here and letting the city of Hammond know what the city does. I think is important. I do the Relay for Life right here in Hammond at Gavitt. The Mayor McDermott and the city of Hammond is our event sponsor. But it doesn't stop there. Last year was the first year I did it here in Hammond. They had another staff before me. And I said, what do I need to do? They said, call the city, see if we can get some tables. So I called the Parks Department. They said, sure, how many? I called the police department, said, this is our event night. Could you have extra patrol? Absolutely. They were there. Not only that, but the police got out and walked the track with the survivors and walked with the people and talked and played with the little kids. Meant a lot. I want to say thank you, Mayor, for your support and your dollars and your staff. We couldn't put a dollar amount on what your staff has done for our Relay for Life. The money that we raise for Relay stays right here in this community and helps you guys right here. So
thank you very much.
I wish I could give a plaque to every one of your staff members, but Mayor shared this with them all. And thank
I'm not going to share it, but I appreciate it. Do I really have to share it?
No,
Thank you very
but
much.
I can't thank you guys all enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You know, every year, I mean, Relay for Life it seems like every year you always do it right in May, right? You could almost set your clock to the fact that when they would do the Relay for Life, there would be a horrible thunderstorm every year. It's crazy, but they're out there all night long, you know, battening down the hatches and walking all night, and the Relay for Life. And everybody in this room has been touched by this horrible disease. You know, whether it be Relay for Life or St. Baldrick's donating to kids, seems like City of Hammond always steps up when we need to, and that's a reflection of everybody up here as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, 2nd District, for hosting Mayor's Night Out. Our next Mayor's Night Out is scheduled for Wednesday, February 25th at Edison Elementary School from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Thank you all very much, and be careful driving home.